the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. We are all thankful to our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the spirit of water. We turn our minds to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves to us as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water, so we turn now to the fish and send our greetings and thanks. We turn now toward the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plant grows, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing the plant life for many generations to come. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all the food plants we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped people survive. Many other living things draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them greetings and thanks. With our minds gathered together, to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. You see them near our homes and in the deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. We turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many peoples of the world use the tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree of life. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all birds, from the smallest to largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. We now turn to the west where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them the water that renews life. We bring our minds together as one to send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the thunders. We are all thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the four winds. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the brother, our sun. Put our minds together and give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of women all over the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time, and it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the grandmother, our moon. We give thanks to the stars who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night helping the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered as one, we send greetings and thanks to all the stars. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help through the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now we turn our thoughts to the Creator, or Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our mind together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and things in their own way. Now our minds are one. Now that we've acknowledged all our relations, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Ottawa people.
In the People's Court of Turtle Island, the People versus Jason Kenney. This matter has come on for oral argument before the People's Court of Turtle Island at 2 o'clock p.m. At 2 o'clock p.m., June 9th, 2012. We will hear argument today in case 08-69, the People versus Kenney and the consolidated case. This Honorable Court of the People of Turtle Island with the Honorable Judge Mambaringo is now in session. All rise.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case involves the crimes held against the people. The people are the plaintiffs in Jason Kenney, the Minister of Citizenship and Deportation. The Minister of Citizenship and Immigration is the defendant. The people's lawyer, do you wish to make an opening statement?
You're the defense now. Oh, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case will prove the numerous crimes against humanity that Kenney has willfully perpetrated. Kenney is seeking to push through measures that dismantle Canada's refugee system by broadening and deepening the scope and brutality of its system of detention and deportations. He is proposing to create a racist two-tiered immigration system that will deprive migrants and refugees of their fundamental rights to due process.
Shame!
Shame! The Bill C-31...
Order!
Shame!
Shame!
The Bill C-31 that he is proposing is an act that is designed to exclude, jail, and deport those seeking asylum, and is most accurately described by us as the Refugee Exclusion Act.
Blah, blah, blah. Whoa! Let me tell you something. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm simply seeking to increase the safety of Canadian citizens. Mostly white Canadian citizens. There are many unscrupulous people seeking to enter this country and use our resources for their own gain. Immigrants and refugees should not have more advantages than Canadian citizens. We simply want a safe and prosperous and white Canada. Thank you!
Plaintiff's
Seek
lawyer.
Harper! Seek Harper! Ah!
Plaintiff's lawyer, please call your first witness.
I call Sâkihitowin Awâsis to the stand, please.
Don't lie.
Raise your right hand.
No
Do you
doubt.
solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you swear to the people?
Swear to the people.
The white people.
The freedom to move, return, and stay is not something new that we recently decided we wanted, nor is it something that can be granted by the government, Mr. Kenney. The traditional right to bodily autonomy is a way of being, the way we are ourselves. What are borders? Controls that further increase criminalization. But being Indigenous or being a migrant is not in conflict with the law. The law is in conflict with the people. Woo! The legalization of bodies of people is a colonial impact. And labels such as illegal immigrant are a form of silencing when the person is a label first and a person second. You yourself, Mr. Kenney, are a European immigrant. And the Canadian government has broken most treaties that our ancestors agreed to when they arrived on this land. Mr. Kenney, liberty and security are not at odds with each other. Life and choice is a false dichotomy. We have the right to be both safe and free. And even though this would increase the quality of our experiences, We find no evidence of accountability or autonomy in the Canadian Court of Law. So, this park is our court. These streets, co-ops, and classrooms are our courts. Because decriminalization is necessary, but not enough. This is a systemic issue. We need to be critical of all the different ways we participate in the system and oppress each other everywhere. You heightened border controls, Mr. Kenney, furthering the violence of the criminal injustice system, a form of ongoing colonial violence that affects us all. How can you say what trafficking really is when Indigenous peoples were forced off of lands and into reserve systems? Where are the borders? Who decided? Not the Indigenous nations divided by borders all over Turtle Island and the world. Colonialism is the oppressive government authority established through the creation of settlements by a jurisdiction. In this case, the colonial Canadian government. Despite what history books tell you, the word Canada actually comes from the word Ganada, which can be translated to mean village or settlement. Mr. Kenney, decolonization, the undoing of colonialism, is valuable to everyone. We are entitled to self-determination, sovereignty over bodies and spaces, and the right to govern ourselves. When we acknowledge our own colonial privilege and recognize the ways that we replicate colonial relationships with ourselves, with each other, and the earth, we can find strength and unity in decolonization. Miigwech.
No fences, no borders, no fences, no borders.
Judges are supposed to be impartial.
Judge?
Next minute.
I call up representing the plaintiffs of People for Peace, David.
Raise your right hand.
I'll raise my left.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you swear to the people?
I solemnly affirm to the people. Sisters and brothers, the accused before us today has a very long criminal record. His record actually goes back a long way before the current government. And for those of you who might not remember, I want you to remind you that his roots go back before the Conservative Party to one of the best acronyms in Canadian history, when the formation of the Conservative Reform Alliance Party. You can't make this shit up, really. There's a Reform Alliance wing that formed it. The Reform Alliance ring, which was the core of that crap. This guy, then in opposition, was already calling in the Western Catholic Reporter for Canadian Christians to support the State of Israel. So this man, since before the current government, before they even had anybody thought they were going to form a government, has been an accomplice of the crime of apartheid and part of a long tradition of Canadian complicity with the Zionist crime of apartheid in occupied Palestine.
Shame!
Order.
I don't have to tell you that much about the crime of apartheid, but it is, and it has been in Canada, part of a colonialist project and an explicitly racist colonialist project for more than a century before the invention of Jewish Zionism. So for more than a century before Herzl, we're talking about the 1700s, folks, people from this ideological tradition were promoting the idea of, quote unquote, redeeming the land by white guys buying land in Palestine to give to the Jews because they didn't want the Jews here. So they're doubly racist. They were anti-Jewish racist, they were anti-Arab racist, anti-Palestinians who thought that they could buy somebody else's land to create a homeland for people they didn't want as part of an imperialist project to create a buffer state for the British Empire, a dominion like the Dominion of Canada in the Middle East. So since then, this has been part of a religious and imperial tradition that, as I say, has very deep roots in this country and is something that the settler society in this country has to bear a historical responsibility for. But his crimes don't stop there. That's just the criminal record. Let me count the ways. This minister has, since arriving in government, got a reputation for being a minister of censorship and deportation. And I'll just give you one example of what I mean by censorship rather than citizenship, rather than people's rights. When a person, a British parliamentarian with the courage to speak against Zionist apartheid, wanted to come to this country to address audiences, this man's ministry cynically manipulated the public office of the immigration officials to exclude George Galloway from entering Canada and addressing people who needed to hear his message.
Order.
He got his ass kicked in federal court. Sometimes the state's court actually has the people's interest at heart. Sometimes. We still need the people's court. But that's just to show you how egregious, how terribly obvious the violation was, even of the state's own laws, when they excluded George Galloway. And of course, as always happens, the heavy end of the state has exactly the opposite effect, and George got more people listening to him when he finally did visit Canada after Kenney and his henchmen had their asses kicked in federal court. But the crime that I'm here to speak to you today, apart from that antecedent, that criminal record, the crime that I'm here to speak to you today, apart from complicity in apartheid, apart from censoring the views that you're allowed to hear by excluding people from this country, I'm here to speak today about the deportation of, we've heard about the deportation of stateless people or people who don't enjoy citizen rights in this country. I'm here to talk specifically about U.S.-Iraq war resistors who came to this country knowing that Canadians had a proud history, Canadian people have a proud history of welcoming people who refused to fight in imperial wars. That proud history was cut short by this man's government and by this man's ministry, and to his shame and ours, they deported some of those courageous people back to face military courts in the U.S. Shame. So for censorship, for deportation, and for complicity in apartheid Zionism, I call for a conviction of this man for the people. Is it time to speak to sentencing, or are you going to hear sentencing later?
Sentencing later. Next
Okay.
Next minute. Order. Give him a fine.
The plaintiffs would like to call up Sarah from the Amazon Collective, a feminist collective, to read a piece of evidence that has been submitted to this court.
Mr. Kenney and the courtroom, I want to speak specifically to women's issues, and so because women's issues are the way in which women experience most oppression and violence in intimate relationships, the information being submitted to the court is in the form of a breakup letter to Jason Kenney. Dear Jason, we need to talk. We've been doing a lot of thinking and we want to break up with you. It's just not working out. It feels as though you aren't listening to our needs. You're always off with your friends and don't make any time for us. I feel like you aren't attentive. We really want different things, and as a partner in this relationship, you kind of suck. For example, the Protecting Canada's Immigration System Act, which you passed, is going to severely impact refugees escaping from violence and persecution, particularly my women sisters and queer and trans-identified loved ones and their families. I don't know if you know this, but 1 in 5 women, my sisters, are born outside of Canada. And it seems though you're either blatantly ignoring them or else you've forgotten them and their needs. And no one likes a partner who ignores the needs of the persons he's in a relationship with. Not good, babe. It's really done. The amount of douchebag moves you have pulled have made that decision clear. We will be a lot healthier and happier without you in our lives. Let's talk about how you're putting women, queer, and trans lives in danger. First, by designating certain countries as safe, it will result in women being deported back to violent situations. What is excluded in our definitions of safe countries? Basically, these changes fail to recognize that women may experience systematic discrimination and unchecked gender-based violence in countries that are otherwise considered safe. When we no longer support women who come from these safe countries, we likely force them back to violence they fled without any state protection. Also,
These new laws of yours put women at a higher risk for experiencing and being forced to stay in abusive relationships. Many women are here under the sponsorship of their spouses. This means that in relationships that hold domestic violence, a woman cannot seek help, report her partner, or leave the violent environment for fear of deportation, as her status will be tied to that of her spouse.
Shame.
This bill forces women to stay in abusive relationships and creates more households in which children are being raised with violence as the norm. As well, women who arrive in Canada in an irregular manner will be immediately imprisoned. For women fleeing violence, rape, incest, and torture, this is an additional trauma and another form of systemic violence, which we can also see re-victimizing them. Basically, Bill C-31 results in an arbitrary detention, intimidation, failure to protect, ultimate re-victimization of highly vulnerable people who seek asylum in Canada, especially the most vulnerable among them, women and children. Jason, your contribution to this does not feel good to me. I need a man who can...
I'm here.
Problem is I don't need a man, that's the other part. I need me a man who can remain accountable to the ways in which he perpetuates violence in our communities. I also need a family man, which you are clearly not. With the moratorium on parents and grandparents reunification, women who traditionally look to parents and grandparents for assisting in caregiving and passing on of cultural traditions can no longer do so, increasing the burden on them. Also, it really bothers me how much you don't support the queer part of my identity and blatantly disregard my queer trans brothers and sisters.
Shame.
Shame.
Some of the direct impacts on the queer communities would be those seeking asylum based on their sexual orientation or gender identity must repeatedly explain why they are seeking refugee status to a variety of immigration officials. Therefore, LGBTQ2 refugees are compelled and continuously out themselves while in detention, increasing their exposure to homophobia, transphobia, and state violence. The secession clause also has had a lot of impact on my queer and trans brothers and sisters. For you to take status away from them if you deny that they are no longer needed protection. That's messed, yo. You've never experienced a life in which you've been closeted, unable to openly be yourself, and fearful for your life. For you to take away status of LGBTQ2 folks who've gained refugee status because of persecution based on sexual orientation and or gender identity. Even those who are presently permanent residents, no matter how long they've been living in Canada, without any notion of the impact, shows how much you have not been invested in this relationship. You don't care about how your actions affect others. I know that you know some gay people and you're cool with it, but frankly, that's not good enough, hun. In fact, your whole idea of safe country designation prove how much you're only thinking of yourself and people like you. The designation doesn't include persecution of queer, genderqueer, and trans individuals. Also, the very definition does not mention gender and is traditionally tended to be interpreted in a way that does not account for women's experiences of persecution. So maybe you need to think about the kind of people you want to be in a relationship with, because women and queer folks clearly aren't your focus. Leaf's director of litigation told me that in addition to conflicting with internal covenants, the bill appears to breach the quality of life and liberty and security of the person's right under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Canada is a country that hilariously prides itself on its humanitarianism. Joke.
Squandered.
Yeah, you're not looking like the good guy right now. In fact, you're kind of being an ass. Shame on you, Jason. Before you get your back up, think about it. Where are women's voices in this process? Where is the legislations and policies that recognize and protect the safety of women and children? What happened to helping women who face gender persecution around the world that used to be our focus? Please stop making decisions on things that you have no idea about. I see what you're doing, and we can't just stand by as you make women and their experiences invisible. Shame on you. Start being accountable to the people who you claim to be in a relationship with. We see who you're actually in bed with, and we don't put up with being sloppy seconds. Sorry, we're done. It's not us, it's definitely you. I'd like to say we can still be friends, but that would be a lie. Let's just call this what it was, a failed experiment. Why don't you move along and we'll find someone who's actually ready to be in this relationship. Don't call.
I would like to call Mr. Kenney.
Yes.
Settle down. I would like to call next to the stand Representative Pablo from Surla, the Students United in representing Latin America, an organization that has been dedicated to advocacy, education, and social justice for Latin America.
Woo!
Thank you.
Please raise your left hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you swear to the people?
Yes, I do. Hello, everyone. We're here today joining forces with No One is Illegal on an issue that is very close to our hearts: immigration and justice. That is the only name that we can give to this bill, C-31, that Conservative Stephen Harper and this man right here is intending to pass through the law.
Let's not make this personal.
What's personal? Along with the most obvious racist aspects of this bill and the attacks against the most basic human rights that Canada has committed to the UN, we want to focus on three very troubling issues. The first one is how this bill is a new form of colonialism. The second is how this bill puts the lives of real people in danger. And third is how this is the most anti-Canadian thing to do. The reason why we say this is a new form of colonialism is because this bill is fueled by intense geostrategic, military, and economic agenda that the Conservatives are trying to push in the hemisphere. We are seeing that with this bill, the Minister of Immigration alone can decide what a safe country to live in is and where it is located. Unfortunately, for many of our Latin American compatriots, it is located in our countries where there happens to be huge resources of wealth, and which happen to be at the same time the most violent and with some of the worst human rights abuses. One clear example of this is Mexico, where I am from, where in the past 6 years more than 60,000 people have been killed due to drug-related violence and fueled by massive consumption of illegal narcotics in North America. Mexico has become one of the main routes for drug traffic, and where the government has unleashed a major war against the cartels that control that traffic. This has led to the massacre of peoples that are constantly being beheaded, shot in public places, such as malls, casinos, hotels, restaurants, in the day or in the night, and where the police, military, and government officials are bought up with drug money to join the ranks of the cartels that they themselves are supposed to combat. The situation in Mexico is such that in 2009, alone, close to 10,000 people applied for asylum in Canada and were denied. Shame on you! But it so happens that Minister Kenney does believe that because Mexico is a safe and democratic country, the Canadians have to continue to strengthen its economic ties through the exportation of cheap labor to places like southwestern Ontario, where Mexican migrant workers can be paid 15% less than the average Canadian worker in Ontario and continue to be exploited. Shame on you. And they are still forbidden asylum. Now, is that how we build partnerships? Shame on you. It also happens that Mexico sits on a geography that is very much desired by the monstrous mining industry, which seek to exploit resources in places like the southern states of Mexico, in the mining towns, and where military occupation continues to grow. It kind of brings us back in time when the conquistadors exploited the gold and the silver from our land and killed and subdued by force anyone who dared to stop them. That is why we say that this is a new form of colonialism, because in places like Colombia, where the founder of Sorla, Juan Diego Castro, is from, we just saw over a year ago the benevolent government of Stephen Harper sign a free trade agreement with one of the most ruthless presidents to have sat in the Colombian government, the one Álvaro Uribe Vélez. Shame. And by the way, it has been denounced that the Colombia-Canada Free Trade Agreement was written by the mining industry, by lawyers and the mining industry in Canada and Colombia, and that is not a secret. So once again, you have come out without hesitation and said that Colombia is a safe and democratic country to live in. Why else would we make business with them, right? This government will stop at nothing to make sure that the mining industry rip all the resources they want from any country they put their eye on at any time. That is why this is a new form of colonialism, we are seeing the 3 Spanish ships ashore in the form of large mining trucks and giant excavators. And these new conquistadors wear suits and ties and carry with them the heavy hand of the most conservative government in Canadian history. This takes me to the next point that we wanted to make. That this policy has real life consequences for people. We invited today Jaime Martinez from the Association of Appeal and Compassion of Mercy and Refugees in Canada. Unfortunately, he could not be with us today since his personal situation is one where he is at risk of being deported. Shame on him.
Shameful.
But I can tell you that Surla has supported Mr. Martinez in a number of actions to bring awareness to the situation of many Colombian families who have been at risk of being deported back to Colombia. Mr. Martinez started this group to unite forces with other individuals and families whose refugee claims have been denied and who were feeling defeated by the change in the policies and attitudes toward Colombia, Mexico, and Honduras refugee seekers. He has successfully fought and supported 12 families in the refugee process through humanitarian aid and mercy claims for refugee status. Unfortunately, 29 families who were part of the group lost their cases and were subsequently deported back to Colombia. And there are 7 more families who are waiting for answers to their claims. Shame. What Bill C-31 does not maintain is the real suffering of the people who in many cases fled their country due to violence and threats. What about the trauma of the individuals and the families that go through an arduous process for asylum and then are rejected and sent back to the violence and threats which they have fled their countries to begin with? We know of the case of a young Mexican woman named Grace who was deported back to her death, being rejected twice for asylum in Canada.
Shame.
She was one of the victims of you, Jason Kenney. One of your policies to reject people on the basis of his government's best interest or the Canadian mining industry's best interest, rather. I want to close off with my last point to remind all of you that this is the most anti-Canadian bills that this most anti-Canadian government has tried to pass. Canada is a country of immigration, of many nations and colors, and unless you're an Indigenous Canadian, don't pretend like you have the righteousness to say who should not stay in this country, especially when you clearly have an agenda intended to support private corporate interests. We need to wake up, Canada, and realize that we are losing the grip of what we thought we are, a nation of peace, openness, and fairness. The neo-fascists in government are taking us south, and by that I mean they are making us in the image of the worst qualities of our neighbors to the south. Let us fight back against this government and this bill.
Mohammed Mahon.
Maybe we should frisk you first.
Mr. Kenney.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you swear to the people.
Everyone who comes to Canada has an identity they carry with them. And a lot of people don't understand that identity that they have. And so being born and raised here, my parents are from the Middle East. My father's from just outside of Damascus, Syria. My mother's from what's known as Lebanon today. I had to investigate where it was from, because I started learning in school that Canada actually belonged to natives, and it was inhabited for thousands of years by natives. And I came to thinking that a lot of the people that came from the Middle East didn't have a choice. And I tried to investigate my father's reason for coming to Canada. And he came at a time when there was a struggle, but there was an instability, and there was danger, and there was a potential for conflict. And we see those things crystallizing today. Most people that came recently from the Middle East didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice to come here. They're coming in a survival mode. They're coming to flee bombs, oppression, civil war. And my question to Mr. Kenney is, what kind of hypocrisy is it when a country wages war on another and doesn't let its innocent flee for cover? There are real problems. There are real problems in the city alone that are pushing war and immigration. People have to leave. They can't stay where they are. And we need real solutions. And I think this is where, when we come together like this and we talk openly, we consult, we plan, we hope for a better future. Thank you very much.
Order! Order! Next witness, please.
We'd like to call up to the stand Patti, President of the London and District Labour Council.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so you swear to the people?
I do. Greetings and solidarity to everyone from the London and District Labour Council and also from the Ontario Federation of Labour and the Canadian Labour Congress. And as for you, Jason Kenney, and the Prime Minister Stephen Harper and their government, I say shame. Shame! And I know I said to the Sister Trinny that I wanted to speak mostly to everybody here. This is a major historic turning point for Canada, and I appreciate all of the comments about systemic violence, the history of systemic violence and oppression in Canada. And that is very real and present, and I respect all the other speakers and what you've said. But right now, of course, the labor and social gains that have been hard fought for so many decades in Canada are under attack in new ways. I applaud very much the No One Is Illegal group and all of the activists here. Let me be very clear. The position of the labor movement, the position of the Canadian Labour Congress, and this is to you, Jason Kenney, our position is immigration, not exploitation. I'd like everybody to say that. Immigration, not exploitation. Immigration, not exploitation. I wanted to speak to a couple of things in particular that other people hadn't addressed. One of them is the omnibus bill, Bill C-38. This is no news to any of you here. This is a very dangerous bill for a number of reasons. Our democratic process is under attack. The brother talked about the free trade agreement that the government signed with Colombia, which is shameful. They don't even have to take that and are not taking it properly to parliamentary process any longer. And this is shameful. Bill C-38, the omnibus bill, would allow even more concentration of power and even more attacks on our democratic process.
Shame! Shame!
It is shameful. Furthermore, there are very specific changes to the temporary foreign worker program, which was already totally unacceptable and totally problematic. Both the current program and the changes in Bill C-38 will ensure a disposable workforce. We will not tolerate this. We stand up for all workers, for the right of all workers to have living wages, good working conditions, labor rights, and human rights in their workplace and in this country. The temporary foreign worker program, implemented in 2007, has already had and implemented massive labor and human rights violations in workplaces all across Canada. But the new changes will exacerbate those violations. So we will see, for example, that employers can call up, it's like a drive-through for exploitable workers, workers from other countries in only 10 days. And that's completely unacceptable. We've already seen that the wages are lower. Now the Harper government's giving them permission, giving employers permission to drive down those wages
even more. And also, and this is shameful, Mr. Kenney, employers can actually opt out of, that is, choose not to be monitored for labor or human rights violations in the workplace. This is shameful. So the TWFP is clearly a tool for quick access to workers and even further exploitation of workers. And let's say it again, immigration, not exploitation. Immigration, not exploitation. And to all of you here, and this is brilliant, thank you to the organizers. Our strength is one another. Our strength is in our solidarity. And as grassroots activists, we've had quite a powerful year of fight back. We've had Occupy in the park and all over the world. And you're going to see more of all of us. The Quebec student movement, and I see a lot of you wearing the red squares here today. What a phenomenon.
Hate those guys too.
It's an example of sustained resistance. More is coming, Mr. Kenney. We've got Lead Now. There are rallies against the omnibus bill happening all over the country, as you know. We have a rally this Wednesday at 5:30 in front of Susan Troupe's office. I invite all of you to be there with us. We have the brilliant Pots and Pans rallies. There's so many of them that it's hard to keep up with them all, and that's brilliant. So we need to keep building our local movement. We need to keep building power collectively. This is an important part of it. And June 13th, by the way, will be a National Day of Action against the Omnibus Bill. June 14th, and we've already had Brother Stuart Weiss signing people up for this. We're having a session on the changes to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, NDI. We can give you that information. We invite everyone, and we will have speakers, but a really important part of that session is going to be planning the ongoing fight back. So we invite everybody. Again, thank you very much to the organizers, and once again, let's say it together. Immigration, not exploitation. Immigration, not exploitation. Solidarity.
Let's not sell exploitation short. There's a lot to be said.
Quiet. Plaintiff's counsel, would you care to make a closing argument to the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Not her again.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence you have heard today proves Kenney's agenda. He is continuing to build a Canadian economy on stolen Indigenous lands, exploitation of labor, especially slave, migrant and reproductive labor, and the global appropriation of natural resources. His entire immigration system is corrupt and inhumane. It is predicated on power, violence, and control. Most migrants are displaced and migrate because of corporate greed and policies of imperialist powers. Although they are told they are undesirable, capitalist industries and settler colonial states require migrant and non-status people in order to reap high profits. His proposed major changes to foreign worker programs will give precarious legal status to migrant workers who are indentured in domestic work, agriculture, the tar sands industries, and the service sectors. He is creating a system of indentured laborship. Lack of full status, conditional residency, deportations, detentions, anti-terror laws, and security certificates make migrants vulnerable to exploitation, poverty, and daily indignities. The anti-immigrant rhetoric of illegals and terrorists cultivates a climate of fear and xenophobia that justifies the treatment of migrants as subhuman. Shame! We demand an end to detentions and deportations. We demand the abolition of exploitive temporary worker programs. We demand status for all of those who have been deemed temporary and illegal in order to justify theft of their labor and their lives. We cannot allow Kenney and his government to perpetuate divisive, racist, false ideas that call migrants bogus refugees who are stealing our jobs. We cannot let his government off the hook for prioritizing the slashing of critical public services, bailing out banks and subsidizing corporations, destroying indigenous lands and the environment, and sinking billions into prisons and the military. We cannot allow Kenney to continue the persecution and systemic oppression that faces women, queer and trans communities. I ask you today to do the right thing and bring back a verdict in favor of the people, and join with us to mobilize across this country, rejecting Kenney and Harper's agenda. Thank you. We ask for statements of guilty. We ask that Kenney spends a few years as a migrant worker to endure those conditions. We ask that he spends time within the tar sands working. We ask that he spends time under security certificates. And we ask that he make reparation to all of those that he has wronged. Yeah. Woo! Do you agree? Yeah!
That's ridiculous!
You have to pay, Kenney.
What's that, Kenny?
For God's sake, I'm white!
Oh, you're wrong! Guilty! 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 Guilty!
Order,
Guilty! Guilty! Folks, thank you so much.
Blah, blah, Israel!
So basically,
A good little choking in the morning.
Curse you, Curtis Nixon!
What do you got to say to me, Jason Kenney? Who do you think you are?
Blah, blah, blah!
Yeah, that's what I hear. That was a big windbag. Blah, blah, blah.
I want to slap you, but I can't control my own arms. Really strange.
Oh,
Stephen
yeah.
Harper too, then.
Yeah.
I can't do anything without Stephen Harper's permission. You're lucky.
You're playing Stephen Harper right now with your hand up the minister.
Come here, Curtis. I gotta tell you a secret.
I don't know. I don't think I want to get anywhere near you there.
Come here, Curtis.
No, I think I'm gonna back away very slowly. Hey, look, Jason, it's your friends. Jason, it's your friends from Parliament, the clowns.
Fellow Conservative members.
Why do you have such beady little eyes?
That was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Wonder if that was on purpose or if that's all they had.
Yeah, poke them out, Anthony. Poke his eyes out. There you go.
Legal provision is very small.
How does that feel, Jason Kenney?
I see just as well.
Bam!
See what Stephen Harper tells me. I understand.
Here, see this. I knocked him out.
Come here!
Jason Kenney, what are you doing scaring your children? Why are you scaring
know what scares children? Unions!
Illegal immigrants.
Illegal immigrants as well.
Oh, really?
Immigrants of all flavors.
And what have the illegal immigrants ever done to you?
Well, they work in my sweatshop. Over in Vancouver.
What do you think about workers' rights?
Workers don't need rights. Let me tell you.
Or minimum wage.
And you, Curtis Nixon, let me tell you. I eat punks like you for breakfast. Blah, blah, blah.